Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Oh, Michael's face is Spotify. Just a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
just how I wanted it to be.
How is everybody doing? If you're around, welcome to another episode back in the saddle. Christmas is over, and we're back to dealing with some pretty big topics and bigger episodes. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Some stuff going on in life, but put that
As
aside.
always.
As always, put that aside, and we'll.
That's why we're drinking this crisp, cool redneck beer.
We're drinking like grocery store hipster beer.
Is that? Oh yeah, that's the Blue Moons, I guess, right?
Yeah, they were just like hanging out in the kitchen. So I was like, I think Brandon left them, so I'm breaking into them. But yeah, we got a pretty cool episode for you guys today.
Yeah, it's an episode I've wanted to do for a while, and I know I talked to you about it a while back. But music's very interesting, obviously to us. Obviously, we talk about it. But there's always been like this long-standing obsession with like the occult and like spiritualism in music, and we kind of wanted to dive a little bit into that. And honestly, if this is like a subject that like everybody enjoys, there's a lot more that we could talk about as far as this because we're not even scratching the surface with this.
It was kind of difficult to do research on this just because there was so much to pick and choose from, and I didn't want to be like, oh no, we're gonna end up making like a 5-hour episode. It's gonna be so long. There's so much content we could pack into this, but we're kind of picking and choosing from certain parts of musical history, some being really old and a majority of it being within the modern age, the 20th century, 21st century, that people can recognize.
So, what I'm gonna talk about, I think, is just a little bit about like spiritualism and the occult in music that goes back to even like biblical times and just a little bit of that and kind of like medieval times and then like the classical music era, and then we'll kind of dive more into like modern music a bit.
What's up, Cam? Welcome to the episode. I hope everything is good. And while Cam is here, I want to bring up I've been getting into a lot of movies lately, and it's like, when are we gonna do some movie stuff on here? Can we do movie stuff on
We
here?
absolutely can do movie stuff. I'm just as stupid when it comes to movie stuff as I am with music stuff. But
Like movie stuff and obviously video games. This is like a good platform for that. But I did like a one tier listing for Marvel movies on the previous alias for this channel, and I don't know. I could definitely do some more Marvel stuff. I can do with the new Batman coming out. We could definitely do something about that too.
yeah, for sure. Obviously, I'm super interested in film. I'm down to really talk about anything as far as it.
Yeah, that would be really fun and really broaden our horizons. But just all forms of media, I want to talk about it all the time.
We're like the modern Renaissance men. We're just interested in everything.
We're so good at being interested in everything too. But
So good that we have no actual personality.
yeah, because we just put it all into music. And before we get into it, I feel like we should do like a weekly. What kind of music are you getting into right now, Michael? What's on the map?
Does it have to be like music that just came out?
No, whatever is on your mind right now.
So what's on my mind right now is I am currently very obsessed with I don't want to call them a punk band, but they're kind of like a punk band, maybe like post-punk from like the 80s, the Gun Club, who was a huge influence on like Jack White and the White Stripes, which is where I first heard their music, was at a White Stripes concert. In between, I think the opening band set and the White Stripes, they'll play like a bunch of music, whatever, and it's usually music chosen by the band, I think. But that was when I heard She's Like Heroin to Me by the Gun Club for the first time. And it made like such a huge lasting impression on me. So I finally dived a little bit into their music, and they're super interesting. The dude that was the lead singer, very like troubled, probably like really ahead of his time as far as like music, but just way different than like anything that was like in the punk scene at the time.
Very nice. I still have yet to check them out. I see you're either talking about them a lot or you're posting about them. So I definitely want to check them out, see if I can find anything I really like. On my end, Since for Christmas you did get me Awaken My Love by Childish Gambino on vinyl, I've been revisiting the album again and kind of looking into get some more like funk stuff into my
Um,
palette. I've been
yeah, like going back to like Parliament and like all that stuff.
yeah, and listen like George Clinton and stuff, and I've been listening to like Thundercat as well. Just some really good funky stuff. I like the modern take on it, and a little bit of the R&B mixed into it. So I think I'm gonna definitely check out the rest of Silk Sonic's record. If that Silk Sonic, Sonic Silk, Silk Sonic.
Yeah. What I heard from that album was really, really good. When I started listening to Awaken My Love, I went back and listened to like Maggot Brain and some of those older like classic funk songs.
Bow
And
wow wow yippee yo yippee yay.
I definitely agree with what you're saying. While I respect and I like those older tracks, I really like the modern take on it with like the R&B and everything. It makes it feel a little bit more accessible, I think, for me.
Yeah, the production's better and everything, and that if the production's good, then it's gonna be good.
I can't remember the name of the dude that produces Childish Gambino's albums, but he's like Swedish and he helps like co-write a lot of the songs and stuff. But he's like really everything he does is really good. He actually did the soundtrack for Tenet as well recently.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I definitely want to watch that too at some point. If y'all are into indie acts, I'd highly recommend the husband-wife duo Oh Wonder. They sing every word of their songs in harmony with each other, and the production is always smooth and stylishly minimalistic. That sounds like something I could get behind. I really appreciate the sound of that.
I'm into indie, so I'll probably check it out too.
And I'm just really it goes unsaid a lot, but the power to harmonize really well is says a lot about a group.
Really, and that's one of the things I admire so much about like Richard Edwards and like how he always has female backup vocalists. Just the harmonies that he comes up with are ridiculous. And also, I can't imagine, for me personally as a musician, what an odd dynamic it is to be in a band with like your wife or like your significant other, kind of like the White Stripes almost too. I feel like that's got to be really like strenuous.
Yeah, but like, are they were they husband and wife, or were they brother and sister? The world may never know.
Thank you, Meme Delacroix. Yeah, I forgot his name obviously because it's a very like Swedish name, and I would have never remembered that. So thank you.
So, with that being said, why don't we get into it? I've definitely got some notes and everything, and we have a lot to talk about tonight.
We do, we do. Do you want? I don't know where your notes start at as far as like musically, like what era.
1930s, and then it kind of just skips
All
straight
right,
to the modern.
so I'll lay down a little introduction here. This is going back to biblical times. The connection between music and the devil has always been established. And we see this in the Bible. Lucifer was God's anointed cherub and was particularly blessed with musical abilities. He was actually the heavenly choir director, I believe. I don't know very much about the Bible, but it makes sense to me. And while he was in that post, he led songs of praise. Of course, when Lucifer was eventually casted out of heaven and into hell, he used his abilities to instead turn God's creations against God himself. So I think inherently what that says is that music it's always been a creation of the devil, and it's used to corrupt the youth. Like kind of we've always heard old people say, "Oh, rock and roll's like the devil's music." When what is it, Rumble by Link Wray, the song that's in Pulp Fiction during the scene at Jackrabbit Slim's, when that song first came out, teenagers were so into it that everybody was like hysterical, thinking that it was the devil's music and that teenagers were like going to go have sex and go commit crimes and all sorts of stuff.
What a crazy time to be alive in, but also it doesn't hit far from home now, I don't think.
It's always kind of that way. Music's always progressing, and the new like whatever the current like extreme music is always the music that like the adults are afraid of.
It's just not even just music anymore. It can be anything, and because to think about, it's so taboo that people thought that music would drive kids to do bad things, but there's so many things out there in this modern age everyone's just afraid of. So yeah,
These kids playing their Grand Theft Auto.
it's not so far off. I learned from a coworker who worked at GameStop. He said that people come with their kids, and the kids would ask for GTA to avoid letting their parents know that they are buying Grand Theft Auto. Can you confirm that? Did
I
that
can
happen?
confirm that. As a former employee at GameStop, I was an assistant store manager for 2 years. Many of my favorite stories from when I worked at GameStop have to do with kids trying to buy Grand Theft Auto. I legit had kids straight up lie to their parents' faces about what would happen in Grand Theft Auto. And I think a lot of GameStop employees will tell you this. It's kind of like, or maybe it's just me and the employees that I know, but it's kind of a tradition and almost like a game for GameStop employees to kind of like call kids out on their bullshit and like make sure they tell the parents all the terrific like the terrible things that are in Grand Theft Auto, because it's always fun to watch like the parents' face just kind of like crumble when you tell them that like there's literal like sex acts on scene and you torture somebody and like you can kill prostitutes and then the kids would sit there and try to be like, no, 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 that doesn't happen, that doesn't
It's
happen,
a
and it's
racing game.
it's a racing game, yeah. And then of course like Grand Theft Auto Online is like a whole like monster in itself. But yeah, there were some parents that got really pissed off when they found out their kids were lying to their faces, pretty
That's
much.
that's hilarious. Kids are the worst. But
Yeah.
anyways, we digress. Let's continue forward in the devil and music.
So, I think me and you both know that there's been a lot of talk throughout history about musicians that have made pacts with the devil, selling their soul to the devil in exchange for like musical abilities. So I've got a couple of artists, and they're classical artists for the most part, where this really starts to come into play. And this starts in the late 1600s. The first artist was, I think I'm going to murder this, Giuseppe Tartini, very Italian name. He was an Italian Baroque composer and violin virtuoso that was born in Venice in 1692. He was known for composing the Devil's Trill Sonata. It's a piece that is so complicated that even now many modern players struggle with learning it. One myth claimed that Giuseppe had 6 fingers on his left hand, and that that was what helped him play it. He claimed that the composition himself came from a dream where the devil had visited him and played the song for him. So in the dream, he made a pact with the devil before he was shown the song, which he described as enchanting and beautiful beyond anything he'd ever heard. So when he awoke, he grabbed his violin immediately and tried to play the song the best he could remember. Although, according to him, it still wasn't anywhere close to what was actually being played in the dream. And that was the song that he became most known for. And I think he was quoted for saying that even though his song was great and it brought him fame, it was still so vastly different from what he had been shown in his dream that if it wasn't for his obsession with music in general, he would have just given up on music altogether.
Wow. I like the idea of the devil being involved with classical music because there's something that it's almost like heavenly sounding. So it's a little ironic.
That's gonna play into my next, the next person that I talk about as well, who is also a violin virtuoso. And apparently, there's kind of like this belief that the violin is the devil's instrument, just because of like how it sounds, I guess, and how it's played. And that kind of reminds me of, I know it's not a violin, but
It's a
like the devil
fiddle.
went down to Georgia, yeah, the
Yeah, it's a
fiddle, which is
fiddle.
kind of similar, which is where the devil appears and challenges the character of the song into a fiddle competition.
I think we should touch base on the devil went down to Georgia as well.
It's a really great song.
It,
I mean, obviously the story, I think the story really goes back to a lot of like what we're talking about here, which is
yeah,
like with people
exactly.
offering like their soul to the devil. And there's just a lot of it that comes up in musical history over and over again, and it's always super interesting. But the next person I'm going to talk about is another Italian name that I'm also going to butcher probably. It's Niccolo Paganini, who was also a violin virtuoso. He's considered by many to be one of the greatest violin virtuosos that ever lived. He was kind of an odd figure. He was very tall, he was very thin and pale. He would dress head to toe in black. So this was like, I mean, that's rock and roll, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
original like goth, like emo, like musician. Um, and actually looked up like paintings of him to see what he looked like. And he's not like super creepy, but it is like very odd that all the paintings are of him in just like complete black. So he played violin, and when he played, he felt the music in like every part of his body. And I think this I can understand how this would be misinterpreted as like being possessed by the devil. Obviously, we see a lot of musicians nowadays that some musicians really feel the music when they play it, you know, like we've got this sister from Haim, the bassist, who just makes these crazy faces when she plays bass. Um, but some musicians feel it more than others. So when he played, he would flail around the stage, and he literally felt like every note, and he was so moving with the way that he played violin that he actually brought audience members to tears. One of his most famous pieces, the name of it translates to the witch's dance. He was so uniquely gifted that many speculated he had either sold his soul to the devil or that he was in fact Lucifer incarnate. So over time, rumors spread claiming that his violin strings were actually made from the guts of murdered women, and
Whoa.
others, yeah, very
Okay.
heavy.
Yeah.
It's like Doc Brown says,
Yeah.
or Marty says, like this is getting pretty heavy.
This is heavy, Doc. Yeah, it's really
Can you
cool.
imagine
Yeah.
just being good at something and people just start like spreading these horrible rumors about you because of it?
I can't imagine honestly, but like
I can't
uh
imagine being talented musically.
from a musician standpoint in camps, I totally understand. I make all kinds of kooky faces when I play drums.
I think
It's a
that's
musician thing.
it's a common thing with drummers too. I think I see it more so with drummers, I think, than like anything else, really.
Yeah, it's very straining to play consistently, however hard or however fast you're playing. So you gotta make the face, it
I
comes
feel
out.
Yeah, I feel that with drums. Like I have no stamina when it comes to playing drums. So yeah, make whatever face you gotta make.
And I'm sure
So but
playing like stringed, like classical stringed instruments, it might be the same way. I don't
I
know.
would I would think so. It's a very like they're not easy instruments to play, like
Mm-mm.
by any means. So, in addition to claims that his strings on his violin were made from the guts of murdered women, others would claim to see the devil standing next to him as he performed. Upon his death, he was so revered by the church that he was denied the last rites in the church and was refused a Catholic burial.
Wow, so they went the whole 9 yards with it. They
Yep,
were they were
yep.
sold on it.
I think somebody ended up I guess trying to get that reevaluated, but I know it was a huge issue trying to get him like actually buried like in an actual like cemetery.
I wonder if anyone's like played his stuff or anything because I 1600s is a ways back. If people still have a hold of the compositions that he's written, I'd
I'm
like to
sh-
hear it.
I think they do. We'll have to check out some of this music afterwards, I
No,
think.
because
um
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, the next artist I'm gonna talk about is the early 1900s. So I don't know if you want to take the next one.
Is it the same person we're thinking
If
about?
you're talking about Robert Johnson, it's not.
Okay, no, go ahead.
All right, so I'll talk about one more, and then we'll talk about Robert Johnson, who's really the big story, I think. This is another interesting story because I don't know much about this musician. I've heard of him, mainly through there's a Sufjan Stevens song on the album "Come On Feel the Illinois" that is dedicated in part to this musician, called "Riffs and Variations on a Single Note." This artist is Ferdinand Jelly Roll Morton, who is a famous jazz musician from the early 1900s. On stage, he often claimed that he was, in fact, the inventor of jazz itself. His 1915 piece, The Jelly Roll Blues, was the first published jazz composition. So legend has it that Jelly's godmother was a practitioner of voodoo and that she had sacrificed his soul in exchange for ungodly musical talent and fame. Over time, Jelly became one of the biggest names on the jazz circuit in the 1930s and was so rich that he could afford to wear diamonds in his teeth. So he was like the original, like, had the diamond grill and
The
everything.
grill, nice.
And actually, it became part of his signature look, I believe, at one point. Um, in 1941, his godmother passed away, and at that time, his girlfriend claimed that Jelly had always known his soul had been sold to the devil, and that when his godmother passed away, his time would come shortly after. Jelly died 2 months after that. On his deathbed, he called for holy oil so that he could try and cheat the devil out of his end of the deal.
Wow, that's crazy. That's all I can say. That's
I
all
like
I.
I really like that story, and I really want to listen to like some of his music too because I don't really know a lot about like early jazz. Again, I kind of only know him from that Sufjan Stevens song "Riffs and Variations on a Single Note." which is a really beautiful song, and it's kind of just like a really moody like jazz piece. So if that's any indication of what his music is like, it's something I need to look into.
Like, if you think about from like the 1600s, 1700s, even 1800s, it was all the only music was like classical music and all that. And at the time, it wasn't classical music; it was just music. But you had
Right.
like one style of music you knew, and then come the late 1800s and 1900s, we get blues and jazz. And jazz, even my brain can't comprehend it. So imagine hearing it back then.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, that music was kind of always there in a sense because, I mean, where did like jazz and blues come from?
From the rock and roll. Well, blues came and then rock and roll came,
Well, I
but
mean, where did that music come from, like in history?
it came from. Is it? Do you know the answer? Or
I do know the answer.
you have
So
to.
blues, just like everything else, music always evolves. Blues and jazz came, I believe, from like slave music.
Right. Okay.
So eventually, over time, it evolved into that, and then of course we had like blues and jazz. Eventually, kind of just kept evolving, and a lot of rock became influenced by like blues.
Right. And I mean, when jazz probably reached like its peak in 1920s to like the 1950s, as Cam said, it's like it's next level sounding. So I don't. Just,
Yeah, you
there has to be
like
something going on.
yeah, you've got like all the like the ragtime jazz and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
It is really cool. It's different. And of course, that and blues, like we wouldn't have any modern music really without it.
Yeah, that's really wild to think about.
It is.
So I guess we're pretty close on the time frame to talk about our next player, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think a lot of people know this artist, maybe. And within
I
the
think
history
a
of
lot of people know this story.
they know the story. This is the origin of the story, and a lot of people within like rock and roll uh have heard the outcome of it and where what it led to. So this is about Robert Johnson, who was one of like the biggest blues, like the pioneer of crazy blues guitar. And
He was the pioneer of the Delta blues sound, basically.
yes, so
But
this
him and Sunhouse could be, I don't want to say like the grandfathers of blues, but they're definitely like pioneers and innovators as far as like blues and like where it started to become really big.
so it's kind of like the story is uh true, maybe not so much with when it really gets down to the grit,
I
but
just it's hard to know how much any of these stories are
yeah,
true, but I kind of like that. That was another thing that I thought about going into one of the stories I'm going to talk about later, where I'd always kind of just accepted it was true just because I wanted to believe it, but it's like you kind of just have to take it with like a grain of salt and wonder how much of it is actually true.
I think that's the
But
fun of it.
that is the fun of it,
Yeah.
and I really think we were talking about earlier how I guess unique Robert Johnson's story is just because of the changes that came in himself. And it definitely makes it seem very viable that this is an accurate story in one way or the other.
So I'll start off by saying he was born, I believe, in 1919, 1920, down in like the deep south.
1911.
1911? Okay, my math's wrong.
Busted. Yeah, because he died in 1938, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Okay, but he was born in the deep south of Mississippi, and he had a dream to become the greatest player, the guitar player that ever walked the land. And the only thing stopping him was the fact that he was not good at guitar.
He was a bad musician.
He was genuinely just bad. And every night, Robert would go to his local honky tonk, and every night the patrons would shriek in agony the second he'd start to play. The men laughed him off the stage constantly. He couldn't even play if his life depended on it. So downtrodden Robert decides to switch it up, and he vanishes for an entire year from Clarksdale, Mississippi. And, it's like the 1920s and 30s. Like, there's no way of communication. So he's gone.
He's got, yeah, he disappeared off the face of the earth pretty much.
Yeah, and in that time, he used that year to become the greatest guitar player in the world. And
Right. This is where the story gets interesting. So how does somebody go from an artist who's being booed off the stage every night to over the course of a year becoming literally one of the greatest guitarists on the planet?
practice, right?
You would think so. But a year is not a lot of time. Even if you're, and I mean, there's a lot of guitarists that literally when they started playing, they played hours and hours a day, every day until their fingers bled. But a year is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things.
Oh, okay, so Satan then.
Satan, yeah, it's probably Satan.
Yeah, we'll go with Satan. So, the story, partly backed up by Robert himself, stated that during the lost year, he tried to become a better musician he dreamed of. He, down on his luck and out of options, he met a warlock that instructed him to take his guitar to a specific crossroads at midnight. So, Robert goes up to Highway 49 and 61 near Clarksdale, Mississippi. He gets down on one knee and starts to play his guitar. At the stroke of midnight, a large black man, the devil, comes out of nowhere. Old Scratch stares down at Robert, smirks, and plucks up the boy's guitar. Robert starts to cry, but the devil wipes his tears and uses them to polish the guitar strings. Robert starts to bleed from his mouth. The devil dips his finger in the puddle of blood pooling on the floor and tunes the instrument with sanguine hands. So, like, let's just pause there for a second.
That's interesting because I'd never heard all of that detail about it. Um, it's safe to say Robert probably had gingivitis, I think.
And yeah, well, I think everyone had gingivitis back in
Yeah.
the early 1900s. Everyone was
Not
just in poor
not many
shape.
dentists.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is like partially backed up by Robert himself, this whole tale. And it's
He wrote about it in his songs too.
Yeah.
Like he has a song called "Me and the Devil Blues" where he wrote that me and the devil was walking side by side.
So Robert chokes on his sorrow. The devil breathes it in and then blows that condensed pain onto the guitar's hollow interior. And then the devil plays. It's rich, it's bizarre, it's haunting, it's something celestial. A fallen angel fueling his blues with the visions and a heavenly city he'll never see again. The devil plays for an hour, the moon framing him, and Robert in its glare. So
If that's a true thing, like what a terrifying moment that must have been.
it sounds terrifying,
Like
but
terrifying, but like all these musicians that claim to have been visited by the devil and like the devil plays music for them, the account's always the same. It's always like the most beautiful, like just like perfect music that they've ever heard.
I wish I could hear this music.
No, you don't.
Well, yeah, I guess not. But so the devil helps Robert up, hands him the guitar, and in exchange for his soul, grants him mastery over the instrument.
So Johnson reappears on the scene a year later,
Yep.
like we were talking about, and this was backed up by legendary blues musician, the other grandfather of blues that we were talking about, Sunhouse, who was known for Death Letter Blues and Grinning in Your Face. Literally, like if you're into blues, like an essential artist that you should listen to. So Sunhouse talked about how he had seen Robert Johnson used to get booed off stage every night, and then out of nowhere, the transformation was so insane. He said that the only way that it was possible was that he sold his soul to the devil to play like that.
And he kind of blew up, and he traveled the country, and he became like a huge name in blues and rock and roll. And then on August 16th, 1938, at the age of 27 near Greenwood, Mississippi, Robert dies. But the local newspaper didn't pick up the story for more than 30 years because the man simply vanished.
Really?
Some would say that his soul was reclaimed.
So, did it talk about like how he died at all?
No.
So all right, what I read about him did talk about how he died. Supposedly Johnson was poisoned by a jealous lover's boyfriend, and
Oh.
supposedly as he died, I say supposedly because this is also kind of take it with a grain of salt type thing, because who knows what your body's going through when you're poisoned. So Johnson was poisoned by a jealous lover's boyfriend, and as he died, he howled and claimed frantically that he saw hellhounds coming for him.
Because do you think that'd be like a metaphor, or he was actually saying it?
Apparently that was like his actual words that came out of his mouth. So who knows? It's important that you mentioned that Johnson was 27 when he died. That's gonna bring us into our next little portion where we talk about the 27 Club.
Well, before we leave this area, to sum it up, the Robert Johnson story really is like from rags to riches, but at like what cost? And it is a little spooky, and it did make for one of the greatest rock and roll song stories of all time, and several bands have covered the story of it, the song Crossroads, such as Eric Clapton and Cream
Yep.
and all that. And
There was a movie made about it
yeah.
as well in the 1980s with what's his name, the Karate Kid, Ralph Macchio.
Oh, I've never
And
seen it.
I've never seen it. I've always been told to watch it, but it's a retelling of it where Ralph Macchio is basically a kid that sells his soul to the devil, who I believe is played by Steve Vai in the movie. And then in the climax of the movie, there he plays guitar against the devil, basically for his soul.
That's pretty badass.
It is pretty
But
badass.
let's move forward to the 27 Club, something that we've all probably heard of before.
I don't really have much on it. I just wanted to touch on it because I thought it was interesting because Robert Johnson is kind of like one of the first big instances we have of the 27 Club. Um, Other notable musicians in the 27 Club would be Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Brian Jones, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, and Jeremy Ward, who we'll talk a little bit about later. Um, the issue, of course, with the 27 Club is that rock stars tend to lead like a high risk lifestyle. A lot of like drugs, of course, because a lot of those musicians died from drug overdoses. However, there has been research done that shows a heightened amount of deaths within musicians, particularly at the age of 27, more so than any other age.
Why is that?
That's just what the statistics are, apparently.
It's a little spooky sounding. It ain't
It
no
is.
coincidence, is it?
Who knows? I mean, it might be, but there has definitely. I wish I could remember the name of the guy that did the research, but he showed through statistics that more musicians have died at the age of 27 than really any other age.
It was very strange that like Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, and Janis Joplin, all who were from the same era, almost a year, just kind of all went at the same time at the same age and everything. Kurt Cobain being put into that, I understand, is a little different because it's like 20 years later, but
Yeah,
still. And if you 20 years later, 90s is only like 20 years away from 70s. That's really weird to think about.
it is really weird to think about. It's interesting that a lot of these like super famous people in the 27 Club are kind of like people that were super iconic or I guess brought in like a big change in like the music scene. Like Hendrix obviously brought about like a major revolution as far as like the way guitar was played.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Cobain represented a huge change in a style of music that became big because of him and Nirvana. Um, but yeah, a lot of these musicians were unfortunately drug addicts, I think, and that seems to be the main reason for a lot of their deaths.
It's sad that some of like these talents go way too early. But
Right.
you ready to move on to the next band?
Yeah. Who are we
Um,
talking about?
what do you say we talk about Black Sabbath?
Okay. I've got a little bit on Zeppelin, so we'll do Sabbath and Zeppelin
This
and
could
then we'll
kind of
move
go
on.
hand in hand together.
Okay.
So Black Sabbath is the OG heavy metal band formed in 1968 by Sir Ozzy Osbourne. I don't think he's knighted, but still, just he's kind of a legend.
It sounds good.
Ozzy Osbourne, Tommy Iommi, Geezer Butler, and I don't remember that's the bassist name. I don't remember the drummer's name right now. But they formed in
Come on,
1960.
you're a drummer. You should remember this.
I don't know. Where were we? Okay, so they formed in 1968, and they put out 4 massive albums: Black Sabbath, the self-titled, Paranoid, Masters of Reality, and Volume 4. And they've all been released in a short span of 2 years, while continuously touring, and they're going to work. And a lot of their music, I'm sure you've listened to it, it's really it's even doom metal. It's very spooky sounding. It's got a lot of vibes to it that you would call like horror and all that. So this whole story kind of makes sense. It's a little minor compared to some of the other ones, but it's very interesting. So it's the year is 1972, and they've been like a smash hit, introducing this new genre of music and just like being fresh and brand new, putting out hits like War Pigs and Iron Man, and so they hit the ground running, and their creativity is just like running wild. But at the time, it was time to track their latest record, but they officially burnt themselves out. So they needed kind of a spark of inspiration to get this new album going. And this album we know today is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which has one of my favorite Sabbath songs on. I think Fairies Wear Boots is on that album. But that's like my favorite track by them. I used to play it a lot when I was drumming. So they scheduled to record the record in LA, but Los Angeles wasn't feeling their dark creative needs. So they decided
Los Angeles is like the darkest place I can think of.
maybe not at the time, I guess, but so they originally planned to do that, but it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't meeting their needs. Tommy Iommi was on just like just writer's block, and all four of the members did do contributions for writing, Ozzy and Tommy, and then the bassist and drummer. But they decided they would rent a haunted castle out in England. I'm gonna butcher this name. Gloucestershire, is that what it's called? Gloucestershire, England. So they decided to record their fifth studio album out at Clearwell Castle in Gloucestershire, England, a Gothic revival castle that was built in 1727, and it's been standing long enough to collect at least one spectral entity within its walls. Quoted.
Just one.
At least one. So
At least.
as if it didn't sound like Black Sabbath was already recording all their music in like a dungeon. For their fifth album, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, they did actually record it in a dark castle dungeon.
Interesting. That one I definitely did not know.
Yeah, and so they said as soon as they got into the castle and started jamming, like it just like came like nothing, and that they put the album together. And this is a quote from Tommy Iommi. He said, "We rehearsed in the armory there, and one night I was walking down the corridor with Ozzy, and we saw this figure in a black coat. We followed this figure back into the armory, and there was absolutely no one there. Whoever it was had disappeared into thin air. The people that owned the castle knew all about the ghost, and they said, 'Oh yeah, that's the ghost of so-and-so.'" So they wrote this album in a completely haunted environment. It wasn't necessarily harmful or anything. It was just the owners knew, like, hey, it's a little haunted, just a little bit.
It's just a thing that happens here.
And you said we wanted to get into Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple were among several bands that actually went to this castle to also just jam and practice.
Okay.
But for modern reference, Clearwell Castle is a wedding venue now, so that's kind of cool. Be a cool place to get married, and it's haunted and everything.
That sounds like a destination wedding for like people that are into the supernatural. Like, yeah, let's go get married in the haunted castle in England where Black Sabbath recorded.
And yeah, so the album just like flew out like it was nothing, and all thanks to being in a castle dungeon and just being surrounded by these unearthly, weird, ghosty vibes. So it's not as intense as say Robert Johnson, but it is kind of a fun little story that I wanted to add in there, and it makes total sense that this would happen to Black Sabbath.
Since we're on the subject of Black Sabbath, one of the things that I had made notes on but didn't really talk about earlier was the Devil's Interval, which is... So the Devil's Interval is it's an augmented fourth chord that signifies the blues scale sound. Roman Empire monks were particularly weary of this interval. They claimed that it was an aphrodisiac that heightened sexual feelings and possibly would even conjure Satan himself. In medieval times, use of that interval was prohibited in music. The reason I bring this up is that Black Sabbath used similar melodies to invoke a feeling of like dread and kind of create that really like, I don't know, like Black Sabbath always sounds kind of like ominous and like creepy, and I think a lot of it is because of that.
That like Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath off the debut record Black Sabbath.
The album they recorded in like an hour.
Yeah, that title song is just so eerie and creepy. I can 100% see it.
Well, that's how like even on the album with like Paranoid on it, like some of the other songs, just like the riffs. What is it? I can't remember the name of it. It's rat something.
Rat soup? No.
It's
Oh,
something like that, but it's literally got this like slow, like dreadful riff in it that just sounds super creepy.
well, I'm gonna have to figure this out. I mean, I know there's a song off the Paranoid where it has like a drum solo and everything in it, and the main riff is really good. And
That might be that
my
might be that same song.
my Spotify isn't working, so I have to look it up now, or else I will explode. Um,
So
it
while you're
is
doing
rat salad, not rat
rat,
soup.
rat
Soup and a
salad,
salad.
soup and a salad, it's like the Olive Garden special.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we'll go right into Led Zeppelin from that, and I don't really have much on Led Zeppelin. Besides the fact that there were rumors for a long time that Jimmy Page had a long-standing obsession with the occult. He never really confirmed or denied it, just on the basis that he didn't want people following things that he was into just because he was into it. However, he was the owner of one of Aleister Crowley's former houses. And Aleister Crowley was known as the wickedest man in the world.
Mr. Crowley.
Mr. Crowley, yeah, the man that the Aussie song is about. If you want to know more about him, there is a lot to be known about him. Definitely a big figure in like the occult and like evil magic. So he owned one of Aleister Crowley's former houses. And then of course we have the whole like backmasking thing in Stairway to Heaven. And for anybody that doesn't know what backmasking is, it's when um, a portion of a song is reversed and played backwards to hear something that you can't hear when it's played forward. So there's a section in Stairway to Heaven where if you play it backwards, there's a whole little verse where Robert Plant is singing about like sad Satan and how Satan tortured them in like a shed, basically. Very creepy. It's super creepy to listen to.
Well, it was all the rage way back in the 60s and 70s to just record and play shit backwards on your turntable.
Yeah. And then of course when people asked about that, he said, "Oh well, you've got way too much time on your hands if you think that's what we're doing is singing about Satan secretly."
You fucking nerds. I think that's fair. I totally back that.
Is it fair though?
Uh,
It's not like it's fairly. It's not like it's like. It's very clear what he's saying when it's played backwards. So if
well,
it
it
was
sounds
just
like you have too much time on your hands.
I do have too much time on my hands. When I'm not a capitalist slave to my company, I'm sitting at home spinning my records backwards.
I'm sitting there with my hunchback, turning my table backwards, and
Just huddled over with like spina bifida.
yeah, that's what I have too much time on my hands. But yeah, I remember hearing about that way back in the day. I have another pretty good topic to touch, and then I know you're gonna run wild with what comes next. So are we ready for the touch base on this?
Is it the mansion?
It is. We're gonna talk about the mansion. That's what it's called. The mansion built on the site of a house previously owned by Errol Flynn, and the article like was talking to me like I knew who that was. But
You don't know who Errol Flynn is?
no,
He was the original Robin Hood.
oh, okay. But it was once rented as a magic practice space by Harry Houdini as well. So a little bit of magic going on there. It's a 4-bedroom house in the California hills, and it was bought by legendary producer Rick Rubin in the 1990s. And he recorded his first record in the mansion, and that was Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, and Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I may have butchered the title name. I know it's those 4 words. I may have mixed up the
Blood,
order.
Sugar, Sex, Magic.
Yeah, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic.
What's my connection to the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
You went to the same high school as them.
I did go to the same high school as them.
That's so insane. So, Rubin's recording studio had already built a reputation by the time that Chili Peppers walked through its doors, both for putting out stellar albums and for being a paranormal hotspot. 3 out of the 4 members in the Chili Peppers didn't seem to mind and even lived in the mansion for the 2 months they were recording the album. According to Rolling Stone, Chad Smith was the only one who opted out.
The drummer Will Ferrell.
Yeah, their drummer Will. They do look really similar.
They look very similar.
But so, a vocalist of Red Hot Chili Peppers, Anthony Kiedis, said, "We heard that the property was haunted by a woman who was murdered there in the 30s, and that didn't sit well with him." So, he opted to ride his motorcycle home each night at every recording session. But
I wrote about that too. So the rumor was that the house was haunted because the son of a furniture store owner had pushed his lover from the balcony.
it's very poetic, isn't it?
It is very poetic. And I guess the original mansion burned down after that and was rebuilt at some point.
So it has a history.
Yeah.
But John Frusciante, is that how you say it?
Frusciante.
Frusciante. The guitarist of Red Hot Chili Peppers had some pretty wild claims about his stay at the mansion. The guitarist said he came across the room in the house had some sort of sexual, spiritual activity going on.
It's the blood, sugar, sex magic.
And it even went into talking about the dirty stuff he did. And I don't think we need to recite that on this episode.
It's like Zach Bagans on Ghost Adventures, where they went to the Ram Inn, and the old dude was talking about how the succubus would like fondle him every night.
John would talk about.
Zach's just like, sign me up, like let me get on the couch there.
When the energy felt right, it would be the only time to release himself. So that was great that the article included that.
I like that. That's very poetic.
But the band even believes they even caught photographic evidence of these spirits. In the Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic album insert, there's a picture in red of the band embracing each other with some weird translucent blotch overlaid in the center.
Yeah, they said it's like an orb or something, right?
Yeah.
But they thought it was one of the spirits from the mansion.
As far as the band is concerned, this was a ghost being caught by the camera. It's not uncommon for blotches or orbs to be cited as evidence by paranormal investigators. But it doesn't negate the possibility that there was just a smudge on the lens. I think it was orbs. Put that down in the journal.
Put it down in the journal. So I think there were other bands that stayed there that also claimed to have photographs of orbs. So makes sense, I guess.
There were, and I wanted to touch down real quick on just some other records that were made at the mansion in this paranormal and infamous spot.
There's a lot. There's a lot of bands that have recorded there.
Some that you may know. Slipknot's Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses, was produced there. System of a Down's Mesmerize and Hypnotize. But let's take it back for a second. Maroon 5's 2008 album, It Won't Be Soon Before Long, was also recorded there. Also, LCD Sound Systems, This Is Happening, and even in recent years, Major Lazer and Young Thug have recorded there.
I saw Jay-Z is also recorded there.
Yeah, has one of his first albums he recorded there.
So a lot of really, really well-known artists have been there. Rick Rubin's a really well-known producer. He's especially known for focusing on lead singers and making sure they get the best out of their vocal performance. Also, this is going to segue into my story. One of my favorite progressive rock bands, the Mars Volta, recorded their first album, Deloused in the Comatorium there.
That's right. That was on there as well, but I figured I'd wait till you got into your little spiel about it before including anything. So I think I'm going to let you go ahead with this next segment.
Before I jump into that, I just want to add on to a few of the things about the mansion. So we talked about Slipknot recording there. Apparently, Slipknot also had some strange occurrences. Their drummer, Joey Jordison, was he the one that passed away?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, rest in peace, Joey Jordison. But he claimed that every night around 4 a.m., the door to his room would open. Corey Taylor also supposedly took pictures of orbs within the house. When System of a Down was recording there, their guitarist Darren claimed at 4 o'clock every day the tubes in his amp would act strange. So there's some kind of significance to the whole 4 o'clock thing there.
Yes, that is a good little thing that's happening there.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
Like a common thing, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's when the person who died was at 4 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
But I know we were talking about with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Chad refused to live in the house. John Frusciante happened to think that the ghosts were fairly friendly and didn't
sexy too.
And sexy, yeah. He was super turned on by them.
Don't like that.
No wonder he didn't want to leave. He's like, I've got it all going on right here.
Yeah, they even came back to record Stadium Arcanum or whatever it's called in 2005.
So yeah, he didn't have a problem apparently with the ghosts that were there.
No, I
I
think
just
he
want to
liked
know
it.
what kind of ghosts were there, if they were sexy. Maybe this is the lover of the furniture store owner's son, and maybe she's just like really hot.
Maybe.
So we're gonna segue into one of my favorite stories in modern music about the production of an album. We were talking about the Mars Volta, who recorded Deloused in the Comatorium with Rick Rubin. This also ties into the Red Hot Chili Peppers too, because the Mars Volta is very close to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Um, but this is going to be about their album, their fourth album, The Bedlam and Goliath, which is the album that got me into them as a band. And the Mars Volta is like a progressive rock band. This album just has absolutely insane energy on it. It's so crazy. At the time when I heard it, it was like no other album I'd ever heard. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the backstory maybe behind this album. So it definitely has one of the most interesting backstories in modern music history. While on tour, the band bought a Ouija board from a curio shop in Jerusalem. And this wasn't like it wasn't like the modern like concept of like a Ouija board that we know. It was some kind of like different like board, but still the idea of the game was to contact the spiritual realm. Not long after, things began to get very weird. Through communication with the board, the same spirits started to visit every night. The messages that they brought to the band um, began to kind of form the concept and the story and even the lyrics of the album. I've even heard that there were actually lyrics, or not lyrics, but like poetry stuffed inside the board, and that's where some of the lyrics came from. But the story told is of a love triangle between two women and a man. By some accounts, the three spirits even act as one entity that is known as Goliath. But supposedly, according to, I guess, the lead singer, the album and the story is about two Middle Eastern women who are honor killed. The third presence, Goliath, is a representation of thousands of years of religious persecution and mistreatment of women. According to Cedric, the lead singer, the spirit known as Goliath is a schizophrenic version of three people who are trying to contact us: a male spirit, a female spirit, and her mother. The story is of lust, seduction, and infidelity, pain, and murder. It is a classic scenario of a male character speaking over a female and the female looking for a champion who is brave enough to tell the story. So, the thing that I find very, very interesting about this album is all the chaos and the problems that ensued when they actually recorded the album. So while they were recording it, their guitarist, Omar Rodriguez Lopez, who is kind of like the head of the band and is responsible for making all the music, his home studio that they recorded it in was flooded. I don't know if it was just once. I've heard it was multiple times. But in addition to that, their singer, Cedric, suffered a seemingly like random foot injury that ended up requiring major surgery. And while they were recording, audio tracks would literally just like disappear in front of their eyes, which is kind of bizarre, especially if we think about it, like when we record on computers and everything's digital. If you're sitting there and you're watching audio tracks just kind of disappear in front of your face, that would be kind of concerning.
So this was all the outcome of them messing with that Ouija board they bought in
Yeah, and
Jerusalem,
supposedly
yeah.
this was supposedly like a kind of like a ritualistic game that they had while they were on tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Is every night they would go back to their tour bus and they would kind of just mess around with the board and communicate with the spirits. And after a while, it was always the same three spirits that were communicating to them. And so a lot of the lyrics and the story of the album began to take shape because of that. My favorite thing that happened as a result of this, and I think this really speaks to the album a lot, is at one point the sound engineer took all of the master tracks hostage and locked himself in his house. The guitarist, Robert Rodriguez Lopez, had to come to his house and take the tracks back. And when he did, the engineer claimed that he felt the band was trying to drive people insane with the album's music.
Well, that shit is pretty insane, so
It's wild sounding. So, but I
that's
know,
wild. That's a wild claim from a producer to just take their group's stuff like hostage over their
yeah,
opinion on the music.
he literally took the master tracks, went to his house, and like barricaded himself in his house.
Could you
Um,
imagine paying someone for that? And they were like, nope.
they're like, no, you can't have that. It's mine now. Like, you're crazy. You're trying to do bad
Like,
things.
bro, I'm paying you money for this. But yeah, just thinking you need to protect people from music.
It's a pretty wild claim for sure. And then Omar showed up at the dude's house. I don't know if it was with police or like kind of like thugs or what, but was basically like, "Hey, give me my music back." And so he did. But the other thing that's kind of wild about this is like when we talk about that and we talk about audio tracks disappearing, this album is a very crazy sounding album. It sounds almost supernatural, if that makes sense. To know that there was more to this album, that there was tracks that disappeared that we'll never get to hear, it kind of blows my mind that this was an even wilder sounding album than like the final result. But eventually what ended up happening is Omar took the board to an unknown location and he buried it as an attempt to stop Goliath's attacks on the band.
Wow, that's pretty heavy. But also, can we talk about how Thomas Purgeon's drumming on the record is actually very supernatural as well?
That is supernatural because that Thomas Pridgeon, probably like one of the top drummers in the world, was maybe like in his early 20s when he joined the Mars Volta, and he's an absolute force to be reckoned with on this album. Even like for me, somebody who's not a drummer, to like step back and listen to it and be like, this drumming's like absolutely fucking phenomenal. He's wild. Like I can't comprehend it.
I saw a drum. So I would like to watch rock band videos solely for getting to see the drum chart of a song and seeing how it's played, like pictured right in front of you. And I saw a drum chart for Aurora Boreas, and the whole song is literally paradiddles, which is
Paradiddles?
right
Yeah, that
hand,
makes
left
sense.
hand, right hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, left hand.
But like super fast because it's
yeah,
a super fast song.
it's
Yeah.
at like say like 160 BPM or something, and it's consistent for 7 minutes long, and I can't fathom that at all. And I also
There is
I want to
there's
talk.
like and that's not even like early Mars Volta. There's like so when he joined the band, there's a video of them playing Cygnus Visman Cygnus from their album Francis the Mute. And that song's like 20 minutes. And like
How do you
to
play a
just be able
20-minute song?
to be able to drum like that for 20 minutes straight and like just know how to go between like the different like time signature changes and everything, it's crazy.
I want to talk about how we technically didn't get to hear the entirety of Bedlam and Goliath, and this is probably the record by the Mars Volta that I am most familiar with and I like the most. I think it has a very unique sound and I can hear it amongst their discography. And I am
It
very
does
curious to hear what the rest of Bedlam and Goliath sounds like. To hear more of what we got would be a real
it,
treat.
it does sound very unique. I know it's kind of a concept album, but it sounds unique in the sense that like if you were to just put on a random song from the Mars Volta, like I could tell you that it's from the Bedlam and Goliath just by the way it sounds. Like it all the songs have like this very eerie like similarity to it.
It is really crazy how much shit they were dealt with this record, even so that the story of them making this record has made it into like the mainstream music journalism.
On an unrelated note, their lead singer Cedric Bixler-Zavala said they used to spend I think $10,000 a week on marijuana, and I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Damn, that's unfathomable.
Yeah. But I mean it's like 10 people in the band, so I mean maybe that's not
That's true.
crazy.
That's like 100. That's how much? 10,000.
10,000 a
That's
week.
like a hundred per week. So that's pretty. That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, that's a really unique story, and I really like it. And I remember hearing about it years ago, but I didn't really grasp the concept of the story too much. Right? It was like, oh, that's cool, but okay. But it really, looking back, and if you listen to the record, you're like, there's some like haunts and some crazy shit going on in this. And if you
There's
haven't
there's a
listened
lot
to
of
it,
creepy
check it
shit.
out. Yeah.
And I am particularly fond of there's parts in the album where Cedric uses really like bizarre vocal effects on his vocals to give him like kind of like this supernatural sound, almost as if it's like Goliath talking to you.
And when I hear Goliath, I just think of fucking huge, somebody that's huge and extremely strong. So
Yes.
it's like it makes really good imagery along with even the cover art. Everything about it it's right. It's perfect. If you're a drummer, especially, listen to the Bedlam and Goliath by the Mars Volta. I think you'd really appreciate it. If you're a fan of prog rock and even a
For
little
any Mars
math rock,
Volta album. Any Mars Volta album is like a drummer essential, but especially the albums with like Thomas Pridgeon on it. He's just like a monster.
definitely. if you've listened to like at the drive-in, then you probably have heard of the Mars Volta, or it's it's the same members essentially, guitarist and vocalist.
Yeah, it's the same core members. The Mars Volta basically formed out of At the Drive-In's ashes, which that's another. It's a story for another time because At the Drive-In was on the verge of becoming like the next Nirvana, basically in the early 2000s.
But
It was
cooler.
like, but yeah, way cooler. Just like coked out, like pure chaotic energy.
I want to talk about a few little fun minor uh scenarios that we could bring into the situation. For example, acclaimed rapper Kendrick Lamar claims to have been visited in his sleep by the ghost of legendary Tupac Shakur to tell him to keep doing what you're doing and make the music and never stop. And it's kind of cool.
That's an interesting claim.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have any of those? I wrote down like just a few, just a very
I
minor few.
I really don't have any of those. I'm sure there's some in the back of my head somewhere, but
Legendary pop icon Cher has made claims to have been visited by her late ex-husband Sonny Bono.
I could see that.
Yeah,
That's like a I don't know, anytime you have like somebody that's really close to you that passes away. It's
I
just
I have a story for that.
okay.
I may have brought it up to you before, but there was a night at work a few years ago where I'd walk in a certain spot and I could smell our grandfather's cologne that he used to wear. That it was like a memory unlocked when
Interesting.
I hit this aroma, and I was like, it smells like Grandpa Sid, and it was really cool. I'd
In
never
a
experienced
similar
that before.
in a similar vein to that, speaking of our grandfather, I don't know if it was the night after he passed away, maybe like 2 nights after he passed away. I actually had a dream where he visited me and said goodbye.
I think you've told me that. As far as past relatives, our mom has also said that when she's thinking about her mother, our grandmother, Grandma Gloria, Queen will come on the radio, and Queen was her favorite band, and
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite things that I've
Yeah,
heard.
and that's what and she says basically anytime Queen comes on, she looks at it as like her mom saying hello to her basically.
Yeah, she even said she said a song that doesn't even normally play on the radio. White Ring is a more modern band and has an interesting beginning. Their original singer was unfortunately possessed and died. Bryant came out himself to explain the whole situation on YouTube Live, including his own personal thoughts during the time leading up to her death, such as his skepticism to begin with. Until finally it clicked with him through his supernatural experience he had the night she passed. White Ring.
We were talking about this not too long ago. White
Hmm.
Ring is a like a witch house band kind of
Okay.
or like artists, and yeah, the supposedly the original female member in it died under very very mysterious circumstances, and that I think she believed that she was possessed.
Interesting. I like hearing about this more. So this happening in the more modern uh, era of music too, such as the pop rock band Paris.
They're local
Uh,
too. I think White Ring lives in I think Fort Myers
oh
maybe,
word.
or they moved somewhere locally here not too long ago.
When Paris recorded their second full length, they were like haunted the entire recording process. I wanted to include it as well, but I think we were going a little overboard, and I'm also not too familiar with Paris, or don't know how too familiar everyone else is with Paris. But
Is that the
it's
PVRIS?
yeah, it's the Pivris. It's the Dark
Got
Paramour, as I like to call them. But yeah, they're very good, and their music is kind of like dark ambient electronic pop. So like, a little haunting here and there can do good for that kind of music. Uh,
That's pretty much
I
all
got
I had.
I have one more actually.
One more. All right, let's hear it.
In 2012, Adele moved into a new $6 million home, and she began to hear strange noises that gave her the creeps. End quotation. The singer's lavish 25-acre West Sussex property was previously a convent, fit with its very own chapel, and she has even hired security teams to keep watch in the mansion to see what those strange sounds were and everything. So she bought like an old church pretty much, and it was
Interesting.
haunted. And yeah,
Uh,
that was like another fun fact I had.
That must be nice having that money to do that. Like, oh, like my house is haunted, so let me just hire like round the clock security.
I dropped $6 million on a house and it's fucking haunted.
Time to just go buy another $6 million house.
Yeah, like this ain't no thing. But yeah, that was a fun educational topic that we touched down on, and it was I'm sure it was thrilling and exciting for the audience. But yeah, this was a good start into some of the crazy things we're gonna tackle on here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and again, I mean, maybe we'll revisit this at some point and talk more about like the occult, or we could talk about like occult music genres, like witch rock and that kind of stuff. Ghost.
Ghost. Y'all ever listen to Ghost? There's a few good songs.
Is that the Scooby-Doo music?
It's okay. I want to talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. I don't hear it.
Scooby-Doo chase music?
You don't. I don't hear it at all. It's the band looks like they'd put like black metal and stuff, right? But it's very alternative rock sounding. But it's not Scooby-Doo chase music. Okay. That's just what 4chan says. But yeah, it's
That's what Muse says.
Yeah. And I don't hear it at all. People just got hold of the memes and they're like, that's what this meme says, so I agree. But yes, bands like Ghost and everything, all their songs are about some crazy shit. But yeah, we'll definitely get into more of that.
That reminds me, I could have went into about, I guess, the Mars Volta writing other music that was about really weird shit, like on their album Ambitexture, there's songs that are about like possessed nuns and things like that.
That's like every one of their songs, though.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's nothing new. But as far as future episodes, we definitely have plans for some interviews. We have an interview coming up. It's just a matter of getting the date down. And we're going to go ahead and do some our listen to this streams, probably like making a drinking game or something too.
Yes.
Checking out some new music, and maybe everyone out there can hear some new music courtesy of us. And
just give me a reason to drink more.
Yeah, and hopefully we all like discover some really cool music. And if we hit 200 followers on the Twitch by 2022, that is like 4 days.
That is 4 days.
We'll do a crazy Bean Boozled stream. And if you are unfamiliar with Bean Boozled, it's jelly beans, but they're really
disgusting.
Gross flavored. Yeah,
all the disgusting Harry Potter flavors.
You spin a little plastic wheel and you land on the color, and you have to pick that one and you have to eat it, and it might be vomit flavored, but
and then I also might vomit,
and then it'll get it'll get very vomity in here. But we're at 196 followers, so thanks for that. And thanks for letting
four more, and we'll eat vomit flavored jelly beans.
4 more. If it hits January 1st and then we hit 200, we're not doing it. So yay us. But thanks for letting us talk your ear off tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this has been more of a like a rambly, like more detailed episode. So we like doing this kind of stuff. We also like doing the episodes where we're just talking about like our Spotify playlists and shit like that.
Yeah, we can go across the board with it. I've really come to enjoy talking to other people too. After talking to Michael Darrow, I can't wait to find a few more people to talk to. And
yeah, absolutely, especially because we have a big interview coming up.
We do, and I can't wait to get some of the words out there. So I have nothing left. Michael, do you have anything for the audience?
That's it for me.
All right, guys. It seems like it's been a Tuesday kind of stream for us, so check back next Tuesday, and I'm sure we'll be on. But join the Discord if you haven't already. I'll drop that in the chat. Join the group on Facebook. It might work. Yeah, join the group on Facebook and keep up with notifications, discussions, and more. And we hope you guys have a great night. I hope you had a great holiday, and Happy New Year to everyone. And we'll see you next week. Or maybe sooner. But yeah, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.